Game days in Happy Valley this Saturday. The Hawks are taking on Penn State. Oh, I wish it was Saturday. This is Incompetent Sports Talk. Welcome to Incompetent Sports Talk with Mike Rabon and Jordan Loperena. I'm Alex Solsma. How about the Iowa Hawkeyes topping Arizona last week, 27-17? The Hawkeyes now have the second longest winning streak in the nation. They've won 7 in a row. And Mike, how about the Hawkeye team last week?
Oh, well, I was watching it from beautiful Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and it was wonderful. You know, it was nice to see the offense really put some pieces together with the running game and the passing game. Obviously, Stanzi early was a question mark. We didn't know how he was going to progress throughout the game. But as always, he came through, and so I was very impressed with his ability to recover after that pick six. And Adam Robinson, 101 yards this week. Wager with only 46, but he did have a touchdown. So good contributions in the running game. Fantastic defense. Way to go. Holding Arizona to only 8 first downs. Very excited. Really looking forward to this week and very proud of the Hawkeyes.
And how about Adrian Claiborne? He had 6 tackles, 1 forced fumble, and a sack. He was just a force on defense.
Yeah, and as was, once again, Tyler Sash. He just grabbed another interception, and I mean, granted, it looked more almost like a punt return. He had to literally get under it. He had so much time, but the kid makes a big play anywhere he is at on the field. And you're right, Claiborne had a heck of a game. Jeremiah Hunter led the Hawkeyes in tackles. He had a quiet, good game. He didn't necessarily make any huge plays, but he made a lot of just textbook tackles, and that was the one thing this Iowa team needed to work on, really, was to just kind of make our tackling better, and we did that. And Ricky, once again, by the end of the fourth quarter, had some pretty good-looking numbers despite kind of a shaky, inconsistent game. He didn't give away the game. You know, he gave away 6 points, and he'd be the first person to tell you that. But, you know, besides that, he recovered from that mistake. It kind of seems once he makes that first mistake in almost every game, he kind of recovers and just improves his play the rest of the game.
And the Hawkeyes, you know, jumped out to an early 7-0 lead and then found themselves down 10-7, and I thought they did a great job of responding to that. I mean, they had a couple nice runs there to get them back into the game, but they did a great job there. And also, Ryan Donahue, Special Teams Player of the Week in the Big Ten, averaged 51 yards a punt, even had a 62-yarder that bounced into the end zone. I mean, great job by Donahue. That'll be big this weekend as they play Penn State, but we'll touch on that later. And now Iowa hasn't given up a rushing touchdown since the Penn State game last year. So, I mean, that defense is stout and it's tough. And Mike Stoops, he compared us to USC's defense last year. So that's a high compliment coming from Coach Stoops. This weekend, speaking of USC, Washington might have scored the upset of the year so far as they topped number 3 USC 16-13. USC was up 10-0 in the first quarter, and Washington only gave them 3 more points the last 3 quarters. How about Washington, Jordan?
The Washington defense, by far the MVP in this game, I believe. They, as you mentioned, they just shut down this USC offense. And you know what? They had every right to, because this USC offense, despite some of their running backs, it's very unproven. You know, another first-time starting quarterback in Aaron Corp, and Matt Barkley clearly looks like he needs to be the option. I think they even brought in Mitch Mustain a little bit in the second half. And neither of those quarterbacks are as talented as most of the USC quarterbacks we've seen through there in the past few years. And I was really happy, not only for just the people of Washington, going 0-12 last year, second win of the season this year, and it's over USC. I was happy for Sarkisian. I was really happy with the class in which Pete Carroll handled all of his postgame and, you know, gave nothing but compliments to Washington, didn't blame it on having to start a backup. And I was also happy for Jake Locker. He kind of got scrutinized for flipping the ball up in the air last year, caught a very tough break, and then got injured for the rest of the season. And it was nice to see him come back. He's one of the most talented quarterbacks, if not the most talented quarterback right now in the Pac-10.
Help make the transition a little smoother. You would think to have a great quarterback like Locker for Sarkisian, and that defense only gave up 160 passing yards, which that total is the fewest that Pete Carroll has ever had at USC in all of his tenure there. And also, Mike, no third down conversions for USC. How about that?
Unbelievable. I think USC was 0 for 10 and third down conversions, which is something you would never think from a Pete Carroll coached football team. Jake Locker looks to me like he might be the Tim Tebow of the West. I'm very happy for Washington. I really like Steve Sarkisian. I think Washington, it was a long time coming. I know their fans love it. Really get some energy back in there, and I'm really happy to see that Washington was able to come out with the win. It'll be interesting to see if USC can come back like they have in years past and run the table in the Pac-10 and still make a Rose Bowl berth. We might be seeing an Ohio State USC rematch in the Rose Bowl possibly.
Do you think USC runs the table and at least win? Or win?
They might. I'm not saying for sure. They've got a tough game against Washington State next week, so we'll have to see what happens. But I think USC, they have the pieces and they have the coaches, and they've proved in the past that they can come back from an early season loss in the Pac-10 and still win the conference.
I think Barkley needs to get healthy.
Mm-hmm. Washington, pretty tough schedule coming up too. Do you think they make a bowl game? What do both of you think?
I think they will make a bowl game this year. Might not be one of your cream of the crop bowl games, but I think they definitely make a bowl game.
I think they're going to win 6 or 7 games, and that USC game, if they only win 6, would be the reason they got into a bowl game. So I do think they'll make one.
I agree. I think they'll make a bowl game too. It's going to be interesting to see the middle of the pack of the Pac-10 with teams like Arizona, Stanford, Arizona State, and now Washington all duking it out for bowl games. It'll be interesting to see who gets in, who gets out. Let's also talk about pretty interesting at the top of the rankings. Texas was number 2, Florida number 1, but neither of them looked impressive. Everybody thought that they were going to blow out their opponents. Florida only beat Tennessee, I think it was 23-13 or 26-13, and then Texas Tech gave Texas a pretty good scare. So they're not really as invincible as we thought they were. Mike, I'll start with you. Does any team in a BCS conference run the table, or at least finish the season undefeated?
This is really it's a tough question, but I think Florida does run the table and goes undefeated. I just think that the way their schedule's laid out and with the experience they have on defense, it's really hard for me to pick them to lose a game. Obviously, the SEC is very tough. They're going to have to play LSU on the road, Death Valley, Baton Rouge, very hard place to win. And then they've got to play Georgia at a neutral site, which is always a tough game as well. But I do think Florida goes undefeated. I do think Texas may lose a game somewhere down the line. I don't think it's going to be to Oklahoma State, but I think they may lose a game. I think Oklahoma may come into that game and surprise somebody. Or watch out for Kansas. I know that people aren't talking a lot about Kansas. They haven't played anybody. But watch out for somebody like that and maybe come up on a team like Texas. So I think Texas will lose. I do think Florida runs the table to get to the BCS championship game.
I hate to be cliche in saying it's going to be one of these two teams, but I think top to bottom, they both have the best rosters. I might switch it a little bit away from Mike and say that I think Texas will be the undefeated team. It is pretty much a toss-up between the two. The only thing is looking at their two schedules, Texas, even though this Texas Tech team wasn't that hyped up, again, they came in with the nation's leading passer in Potts, and this would have been one of their trap games. And they didn't look that impressive, but they handled it well, and they have a very stout defense for a Big 12 team, a defense that a lot of these Big 12 schools won't play against this year. I really think that Florida might end up in the SEC with just a few more trap games than Texas, and that is why I think Texas might be the undefeated team. Either way, whether it's Florida or Texas, they'll finish 1-2 at the end of the season.
I don't think either of them is going to run the table. I don't think there will be an undefeated BCS team. Florida, in all their times they've won a national title, they've never won one being undefeated. Somebody always sneaks up on Florida in the SEC, and the SEC is a tough conference. We haven't seen a BCS conference team in the BCS championship go undefeated since I think it was the 2006 national title game when it was USC and Texas, though that would have been the 2005 season. So it's been a while. I think the SEC is really deep. It's really tough. I think somebody will probably sneak up on Florida. And before last week, I probably would have said they would have gone undefeated, but I don't know. I mean, Tennessee's an average team. They just lost to UCLA at home. And so I just got to think that somebody's going to sneak up on them. I mean, even last year they won the national title. They lost to Ole Miss, and there's a lot of close games that they had. Even that one with Alabama sticks out in my mind. So I can't give you a certain game because you never know who it's going to be. But I think somebody on both these teams, I mean, I think Oklahoma or Oklahoma State's capable of beating Texas and possibly Kansas, though I don't think Kansas will. But I think it's interesting to see, though, what will happen. And at least it makes college football exciting because not a lot of us thought Washington was going to beat USC, and hey, look what Washington did.